It has certainly been an exciting day in Dungeons & Dragons news. Welcome, welcome. If you're just joining us, this is the Speaking Common Weekly Dungeons & Dragons news. Without further ado, let's do it for Saturday, June the 20th. A lot of great things happened in the world of Dungeons & Dragons this week. There was a lot of buzz, particularly on the video game side as well as the TTRPG side. We're going to get into that in just a minute, but I do have a couple of very quick community news. Well, I won't say quick. I want to get through these and share a couple of things that we are changing that I'm really excited about. Of course, we're constantly looking how to grow and improve in the stream. I've taken a lot of feedback from the community, and one of them is how I produce news, actually. So if you don't know yet, at shambazilgames.com, the website, I produce one news feature each day. So that's an article a day that covers some of the Dungeons & Dragons news, things that are happening in the D&D sphere to keep you up to date on what's going on. Now, one thing I hate about online journalism is bullshit clickbait titles. Give me some love in chat if you're with me on that, if you also hate said bullshit clickbait titles. And two, having to read through a whole bunch of fluff that's intended to just keep me in an article until I get to the information I want. So I simply said, you know what, my approach to news is going to be twofold. One, no clickbait, no bullshit titles that lead you into clicking on an article and then not being able to get the information that was promised in that headline. And two, is just getting straight to the point. Titles will be catchy, of course, but they'll be to the point where you'll know exactly what you're getting into in that article. And then we're getting right into the meat. So it's a bullet point approach to news. So you get just the details you need really quick, nice, quick, succinct. So you can get onto an article, read it. As a digital marketer, that's kind of counterintuitive if you're trying to keep people on your site. What I want to do more than anything is provide the news in a hard-hitting, impactful way that doesn't require you to stay on a site longer than you want to be on said site. So, yeah, so this is a new approach to D&D news. It's a no-fluff, to the point, designed to be read, digested, and keep you informed into what's going on in the D&D news sphere every single day at shambazilgames.com. So please do check it out. You'll see the news roll right at the top. All those articles will give you the goods up front without having to make you sift through a bunch of crap to get to the information you want or to draw you with bullshit clickbait titles. And call me on that if you see it. Of course, follow me at shambazilgames on Twitter or anywhere in the interwebs for more updates on that. My streaming schedule has changed for the better. Certainly, we've added new shows, and I've gotten into a little bit more of a regimented production schedule. So it begins on Monday. And every Monday at 7 p.m. from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Steph and I jump online and we play co-op games in a series we call 2Play. So 2Play is designed to really be an opportunity for us to play. We banter. We have a lot of fun back and forth. Steph's hilarious. She freaks out all the time. We have a lot of kind of wit and I think a pretty good vibe. That's why I married her, I suppose. Yeah, and we do that from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually do couch co-op games that we can play together, but as in the case of something like The Last of Us 2, we'll pass the controller back and forth. One of us will comment and keep an eye on chat while the other one's playing, and basically just generally crap on each other's play style. So definitely encourage you to join us Monday from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for 2Play. Tuesday is an off day right now. But I might jump on for games for what we call bedtime stories, and usually that'll be around between 7 or 10 and 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those are bonus streams. I'll just tweet those out when I'm jumping online just to play some games if you want to come chat, hang out. Wednesday from 7 to 10 p.m., every second Wednesday, we play the DM's Guild Feature Showcase. And as I mentioned, this is a show that's designed to highlight great third-party content creators and the great adventure and campaign modules that they create. So I pulled together fantastic people from our Dungeons & Dragons Twitter community. We get on Roll20 and we actually stream a really well thought out perpetual campaign that features these modules. And right now that cast is made up of at Pleasant Doom, aka Angela, who's in chat today, at Chickenly Nerd, at Just Drawn Radio, and at Dads and Dragons. That's DADS and the letter N, Dragons. And they're a really tremendous group. We just finished our 4th episode last Wednesday, and in 2 Wednesdays' time, you can come in and join us for episode 5. So keep an eye out for the VODs on this. It's a really great story, great team, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So I hope you join us for that as well. Thursday is also an additional kind of bonus-ish stream. And then, of course, Saturday in this time slot from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., Eastern Standard Time. Every Saturday morning, we have Speaking Common, the D&D Weekly News, so be sure to check us out for that. For the full list of streaming schedule, check me out on twitch.tv/ShamBasilGames. You can also catch me on your streaming platform of choice, and YouTube, of course, for all the edited videos as I get through those. So I'll be sure to make sure that schedule is available, and I'll tweet that out too as soon as I get the visual design of it done. So I hope to see you in stream, because I'm starting to lean a lot more into the live streaming audiences. I really love that interactive nature of streaming. I love to get to know the community that we have here, because they are really wonderful, and I want to say hi to you, so please don't be shy. That's the bulk of all the community news. So that said, let's get into what we covered in Dungeons & Dragons Weekly News for the week of Saturday, June 20th, 2020. It's June 20, 2020. That's right. So, big news in the Dungeons & Dragons sphere, perhaps the biggest so far, was the announcement of the new campaign story arc at D&D Live this week. It is... That's my drum roll, not just me choking on the mic. It is Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. Now, it might not be terribly exciting, because as we reported last Thursday, this was leaked entirely on Thursday. It was actually divulged by a video that went up and was immediately removed on D&D Beyond, where they actually showed the title, the cover, the subtitle, the tagline, everything, and it was 100% accurate, of course, as confirmed in the announcement on Thursday this week. But nonetheless, I'm still excited. It was kind of funny. I think I don't really believe in punishing companies too much for leaks, because let's be honest, like, the communities have become so savvy that they are actively digging for those leaks, and it's difficult for a company. I would rather the company put their attention and energy into making the content rather than combating leaks. Now, this, of course, clearly was some kind of mistake. I pity the poor individual who made that video public on Thursday last week, a full week before the scheduled announcement at D&D Live. They probably feel super shitty about it, but you know what? I think it pays more to laugh about it. In any case, it was up very briefly, just long enough for the internet, of course, to curate and snapshot it, which takes seconds these days, or milliseconds even. And then they ran it through an image enhancer. This is what people are doing now. They ran it through an image enhancer to basically parse out the visual, and we were able to construct in perfect detail the cover of the new arc. So, if you're not familiar, Icewind Dale, of course, that area of Faerun set in the Forgotten Realms, which is also the base for Drizzt Do'Urden, the legendary Drow Elf Ranger, and feature of Ari Salvatore's well-known series. Part of that campaign party with Catti Bree, Bruenor. In any case, they are also the party that features in a little title called Dark Alliance. And you might remember that Dark Alliance has been announced to come out either this year or early next under the partnership of the newly acquired Took Studios. So this is a video game that is going to be coming out shortly, not to be confused with Baldur's Gate 3 from Larian Studios. But Dark Alliance is all set in Icewind Dale. And we've seen, reasonably so, that Wizards has habitually leaned more into cross-promoting through its D&D products, other products that are happening under the Wizards of the Coast umbrella. So it makes sense that, we've got Dark Alliance coming up soon. That features Drizzt Do'Urden and his pals in Dark Alliance. It's all set in the same region. And then conversely, the new story arc and new campaign will be released under Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, coming in September, by the way. That features in the same area. So something to look forward to there. I'm excited about it. I will be planning a game to launch the series and working with some great partners on that too. So a little bit of a teaser there for you. Keep an eye out. More information to come on that, as well as casting announcements for the online live streaming campaign that we're going to be doing to feature Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. Follow me at ShamBasilGames for details on that. Other news that came from D&D Live this week, of course, hotly awaited. This is a big one for me because, as you know, I straddle the line between TTRPGs and video games almost in equal strengths, although I spend way more time in the role-playing game or the TTRPG side of things. Baldurs Gate 3. So we've done a lot of work on Baldurs Gate 3. I did a gameplay demo reveal where I picked apart the video that was released at PAX East last year. This Thursday, before D&D Live started up, or Thursday past rather, Sven Vinke, the artistic director of Larian Studios, of course the studio behind Divinity Original Sin and other such incredible Game of the Year-esque RPG titles, did a brand new gameplay reveal of Baldur's Gate 3, which showed us a lot of other new things too. It was really great. It's looking beautiful. In addition to that, it came on the heels of the announcement that early access will be available for Baldur's Gate 3 in August. So keep in mind that, and then of course they tagged that in parentheses, maybe. And we'll talk a little bit about what that actually means, too. So the first thing I did, of course, as I've promised, was come out with some hard-hitting bullet points about what we saw in that video. It started with Sven playing through one of the origin characters, which is a Githyanki fighter. She's a battle master. We know this because later we see her using superiority device. So it started there, and it begins with the character racing against the illithid tadpole that's implanted in your brain, as well as a number of other adventurers who find themselves in the same boat. They have made some changes to the dialogue, so the dialogue is now first-person active, as opposed to like feeling like it was narrative. And this is something that I called out in the original video that I wasn't a big fan of. I found that when the narration was, it said like, so-and-so did this type of thing, and then thought, it made me feel like I was watching someone else's story rather than being in the story. So I'm glad they've made that change. All the narrative dialogue now is first-person active, so it actually puts you narratively in the shoes of that character, which is a nice change. In addition to that, the narrator's voice in the new gameplay demo was distinctly female, and it left me wondering if that's a conscious change that they made, or if it's if you will have the option to change the narrator's voice. Who knows? But I liked both, actually. I wasn't really precious one way or the other. So the scene continues to play out with that Githyanki hero and her origin story. Of course, in games, just like you can with Divinity Original Sin, you can either create your own hero, or you can play as one of the origin heroes, those who are more baked into the story. Sven did have his own character that he's playing through for the rest of the demo as well, so it's worth noting that that continued to happen. So he was using a custom character. There was really great NPC interaction throughout the story that helps support the story immersion. They're all fully voiced, which is beautiful. Fully cinematic NPC dialogue. Just like in true D&D fashion, you sleep in your armor. There are NPC roll skill checks. So when you roll like a perception check, everybody rolls their own perception check, which gives you a little bit of another opportunity to, I guess, succeed on that if you fail your own. There's a lot of other things that were included in that video. So for the full rundown, do check out chambazelgames.com for that article. There's a lot of stuff there, and I'm going to continue to keep an eye on this because Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely something that I'm looking forward to. As I've said from the get-go, if you enjoy top-down isometric third-party role-playing game type video games like Divinity Original Sin 2 is probably the closest cousin to this, especially having been developed by the same company, then I think you'll really enjoy Baldur's Gate. The other thing that I'll call out is their adherence to 5e rules. They have very diligently brought 5e rule set right down to the action economy. You know, you've got your action, bonus action, movement, reactions, opportunity attacks, inspiration, which behaves just like inspiration. You know, you've only got one. It's a one and done. Everything that you would expect as a fan of or player in the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons rule set, you will see represented in Baldur's Gate 3 from everything that I've seen so far. So really excited about that, looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. In other D&D news this week, I did a quick rundown on some of the main 3 things to look out for D&D Live. So I caught pieces of D&D Live. Of course, I was mainly focused on the Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay reveal and the new early access information, the announcement around the new story arc in Icewind Dale for Rime of the Frost Maiden, and that was really the bulk of it for me. I mean, that's what I wanted out of D&D this week. I wasn't so hot on watching the gameplay, not for any reason other than I was working at the same time, too, so I wasn't really in a position to sit and watch people play, while I do enjoy that from time to time. I'll be honest with you, I'm less kind of plied by, you know, the celebrity tables and things like that. Although the Game of Thrones reunion was something that piqued my interest a little bit. So when we looked at the three main things that I suggested people look out for in D&D Live, if you're like me, somewhat time-strapped and maybe just looking for the highlights, then those three items were, of course, the new storyline announcement, the main stage game. So if you want a quick rundown, if you didn't get to check it out, there was basically the headline game, which featured a bunch of comedians playing D&D, including Thomas Middleditch, who's an actor and comedian, Brian Posehn, who's who's an actor and comedian, Kevin Sussman from The Big Bang Theory and Almost Famous. And I didn't watch it, honestly. I'll be totally transparent. Didn't really. That one didn't pee for me. But Jeremy Crawford had an interesting game with a bunch of WWE celebrities. And it's interesting. There are weird crossovers and fandoms coming into D&D, I guess, because it really does have something for everything. But WWE is something that I've seen feature regularly. That said, I actually do enjoy watching Jeremy Crawford DM games, especially he is kind of like the godfather of the rule set. So it's interesting to see how Jeremy Crawford applies the rules that he specifically oversees in an actual table play. So that's always exciting to watch. Deborah Ann Wall, I have something interesting that kind of changed for me in this. I'll be the first to say it. Please reserve your hate. I was never really a fan of Deborah Ann Wall's DMing style. I found her a little bit too like esoteric and almost like presentational. When I first began to watch her, I think it was I think it was the Stream of Many Eyes was the first time I had seen her DM. And I wasn't a big fan, but watching her this time, I feel like, just like DMs, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, the better you get at it. I actually thoroughly enjoyed her. I liked her style. I like her she's very soft-spoken, but impactful. And I was like, hey, you know what? I think either my perspective has changed enough where I can appreciate this on a different level, or she's just improved and gotten a lot more comfortable. So I actually watched that game, and I wasn't planning on it. Of course, it was Deborah Ann Wall with Amy Acker, Jay Ellis. This was Matthew Lillard, of course, and Sam Richardson. It was the first time I had seen Matthew Lillard play in a tabletop game, and I just thought he only had one volume, and it's like between 10 and 11. But I digress. It's a personal thing. I enjoyed Deborah Ann Wall. Chris Perkins, I always really enjoy. I enjoy Perkins as a DM. I enjoy his games. I thought he had a couple of good tables going. And then, of course, Kate Welch leading the Game of Thrones cast reunion through gameplay. I wasn't able to catch it because it happened in time when I was sadly in meetings. I would rather have been watching D&D in that scenario, but I will go back and look at the VODs. Of course, they had Christian Nairn, who plays Hodor, Daniel Portman, who plays Podrick Payne. They had Ivan Rand, who you may remember as Ramsay Bolton, the tormentor of Theon Greyjoy, Natalia Tena, who plays Osha, and Gemma Whalen, who plays Yara Greyjoy, Theon's badass sister. So a really cool table that they had built around the Game of Thrones reunion, and that seems like it might have been a good game to play. So I will check in on that, because it's not just about like watching celebrities play D&D. It's interesting to watch a group of people who are part of something so epic and fantasy oriented like Game of Thrones, whether you love it or hate it, then dive into a fantasy epic role-playing game where they can kind of play the director a little bit of themselves. So that's I think that would be neat to see. And then, of course, the third and final of the three things I would have looked out for D&D Live is the new reality RP show. I didn't get to check that out for the same reasons. I was just tied up with work. But this is a bit of a new initiative that they're taking on. It looks like they were trying to bring to a remote format the same immersive environment they were creating with the Stream of Many Eyes when they announced Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, where they had created a little kind of scene of Waterdeep complete with like cosplay and NPCs where people could interact with them, but then they also had a game happening in the center of all that. So it's a really cool kind of innovative approach. I don't really know how to play it out, so I'll look forward to checking in on that and seeing how they play. But that is the new reality RP show that they had begun to build into that. It was hosted by Prosperin, the prison ward of Revels, and of course there are lots of teases in this about Frost Maiden's Rime. They even specifically call out Frost Maiden's Rime, and they talk about the 10 towns, which features in Icewind Dale. So at that point, before they even came to the launch on Thursday, I think it was pretty much a given and readily accepted that the new storyline was going to be Icewind Dale at that point. So like I said, I'm not too worried about the leaks. I hope they're not either. I mean, last time, what was it? It was it was when Wildmount was announced and Amazon put up the placeholder listing like a week before they had officially announced it. There are so many ways now for leaks to happen and things to go up inadvertently. As somebody who publishes a lot of content regularly, I can fully see how when you're going a mile a minute and you're scheduling things out that they go up unintended, just like we saw with D&D Beyond. So while I joke, I don't think it's really wise or necessary or even valuable to punish people for that. What they do behind closed doors of the company, who knows? But it is what it is. I don't think it does anything to diminish the excitement around it, right? Or lose excitement that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So I'm excited about Icewind Dale, very much looking forward to it. And those, of course, were three of the main things to look out for Dungeons & Dragons D&D Live 2020 this year. Of course, the annual event where Wizards of the Coast announces their new upcoming story arc. And this one, of course, coming in September. We had a couple of other news items from last week that I didn't get to mention, so I'm just going to tag them on to the end of this one. Magic the Gathering announced a partnership with Netflix that's going to bring an anime to the streaming service. This is not necessarily news, but when I wrote it, it was to me. I hadn't heard about this, actually, but it sounds really interesting. So Magic the Gathering and Netflix are working together to produce an anime. It's being heralded as Netflix's Game of Thrones, so I'm excited about that. It includes the Avengers Endgame duo brothers Joe and Anthony Russo as executive producers. So it's helmed by some people who definitely know what they're doing. Produced in collaboration with Wizards of the Coast, of course, and it's going to feature an all-new storyline which expands on planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering. Of course, planeswalkers... As a player of Magic the Gathering, as best I remember, you are a planeswalker, so you're this arcane entity that has the ability to travel through planes. So it's going to feature on that mechanic in MTG, but an all-new, completely organic and original storyline. So that's exciting. The animation's being done by Bardell Entertainment, who also did The Dragon Prince, which I freaking love, and production by Octopi Studios, who did Valkyrie and Dark Souls animated series as well. So some really good chops around this. I think it sounds exciting. It has a purported release for 2021. We don't know much about the actual release of it either, but it's intended to branch out into multiple other series as well. So I think there's a lot of interest in that. That might be the kind of thing that rekindles my former interest in Magic the Gathering. Of course, when I was a kid in the late 80s and early 90s, I spent a lot of hours playing Magic the Gathering. I have a buddy at work who's trying to get me into it, but it's a little overwhelming with everything else that I have right now. But that might be the right gateway for me because I'm all about watching those animes. And the Dragon Prince, I freaking love. I've turned a lot of people onto that series, and I stand by it. So if you haven't seen The Dragon Prince on Netflix yet, check it out. It's really incredible. They've done a really great job of bringing diversity, inclusion, and just a tremendously incredible storyline into beautiful animation and a long-standing, perpetual, arcing storyline, which it's just tropey in the right way. So check it out. I strongly encourage you to do so. Finally, there was a lot of talk about 6e Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know where this came from, but a lot of people are going on about like 6e is pending now, or like what's coming for D&D 6e. First of all, like I said, all the goods up front. I'm not going to take you down a long rabbit hole until you get to this point, but there is nothing to validate or even remotely suggest that D&D 6e is anywhere on the horizon. So I started this by thinking like, okay, are we just not hitting stride with 5th edition? And we are. Obviously, 5th edition is statistically, as I've reported many, many times, readily available, the most successful edition of Dungeons & Dragons to ever be produced. And by that, I mean between streams, uptake, adoption, celebrity cameos, actual hard sales, production for Hasbro as a parent company, everything is like green, green, green. It's redlining for high-end performance. There is nothing to show any kind of slowdown for 5e. It would be absolutely insane for them to try and position 6e right now. 5th edition is still laying golden eggs all over the place. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. Those are the stats. So there is no real 6th edition on the horizon, but just for kicks, I decided to pull together the 6e hype and just see if there was anything that was like validated to support and anything that was validated to debunk the myth whether or not 6e is on the horizon. So what I found, let's start with things that I found to debunk the myth that D&D 6e is coming. So first of all, there's literally zero info that I could find from any official source on 6e. Nothing. Like I said, D&D 5e is still experiencing record, groundbreaking, and unprecedented growth and investment for both video games, board games, accessory products, and of course the tabletop role-playing products itself. So there's no slowdown there. And from the Hasbro investors presentation in 2020 this year, they said they have like dozens and dozens of cross promotions and video games still to be announced that they haven't even touched yet for the remainder of 2020. You know, COVID-19 delays have been happening as well, but even those COVID-19 related delays and production setbacks suggest that there's no reason to think that they would be working on a new edition of 6e at this point when they're still catching up with their launch schedule for 5e based on the current pandemic. The 5e Player's Handbook is still in the top 100 best sellers of all time, according to Amazon. So they've got a really great contender there that's continuing to perform. There was a lot of talk about the edition release timing. So people say, well, it was about this time when so-and-so edition was released. There's no real logic in that other than placing dates at times when editions were released. So there were 13 years between 2e and 3e D&D, and there were 3 years between 3rd edition and 3.5 edition D&D, and 4th edition. Sorry, there were 3 years between 3.5 and 4. So suffice it to say, there is no release schedule. These things don't come out on a cadence, right? Like iPhone comes out like twice a year now, right? It doesn't work that way. So there's no release schedule. That's a total myth. It's a popular myth that you might hear around a lot, but there's nothing to validate that whatsoever. There's an individual who I won't name that a lot of people are calling for the termination of, who's no longer working on D&D, though still a Wizards employee, that this individual once said that 6e would be made to work with the core rules of 5e, and then said we're nowhere near 6th edition, and that was on Twitter in 2018. So that's the only thing where 6e was even remotely mentioned, and of course, given the source, are we really going to put a lot of faith in that individual's statements? Probably not. So let's take a look at what would support the idea that 6e is coming. I have one note. It's literally nothing. The fact that there is literally nothing to support the idea that 6e D&D is coming. Go ahead and challenge me on that. I welcome it. If you have something that contravenes that, by all means, go ahead and share it with me. At Shambazla Games, get at me. I'll probably regret that later, but I welcome it. Let me know if there's anything you have found that shows that 6e D&D might be imminent and on the future. And then finally, to wrap up the news, I do want to say that as we go through with Speaking Common, we get back to my regular schedule. After the live D&D news every Saturday morning, of course, we're going to go into questions about D&D. We'll do some content that I produce and then share out over my channels. We'll do DN tips, player tips, and then, of course, two new segments that I've brought together, which are D&D Rules Solution and Sage Advice Unfurled, where we talk about the fine corners of content that's in the Player's Handbook, and we look deeply into the rules and some of the most hotly contested rules of D&D 5e. But most importantly, once that's done, I'm going to carve out the second half of every show moving forward for actual game prep. That's something I stopped doing. I really want to bring back. So that's digital map making, that's game prep, notes, and planning, and how we actually build worlds. So getting more into the function of actually playing D&D in the second half of the show. And I'm really looking forward to bringing that back to Speaking Common every week right here on Shambazla Games. I hope you'll join me, but that is a wrap on your news for the week of Saturday, June 20th, in all things Dungeons & Dragons Weekly on Speaking Common. I hope we'll see you again next week on Saturday for a live presentation of this on your streaming platform of choice. Thanks for joining.